It was a Sunday afternoon when Eleanor Monroe stood outside her daughter's home, holding a jar of homemade strawberry jam wrapped in a white dish towel. She didn't knock right away. She just looked up at the mansion, her eyes pausing at every tall window and smooth stone column. It was a beautiful house. Expensive. Modern. The kind that echoed inside if you spoke too loud. She smiled softly, but only for a second. Then she took a deep breath and rang the bell. The door opened slowly. A man in a pressed shirt and beige pants looked at her and blinked, confused. It was Brent, her son-in-law. "Oh," he said, not even smiling. "You must be the new maid. Come in, the kitchen's through there." Eleanor tilted her head gently. "I'm not." But he was already walking away. "We're out of water at the table. Could you bring a few glasses?" She stood still for a moment. She didn't look angry. Just still. Her cardigan was soft and slightly faded. Her gray hair was pulled back in a low bun. She didn't wear jewelry or makeup. Her shoes were simple flats, the kind you'd wear to walk to a corner store or sit in a garden. She didn't look like someone who owned property. She didn't look like someone who held power. She didn't even look like someone who belonged in that house. But that's the thing about Eleanor. She never wanted to look like anything. She just was. As she stepped inside, the warmth of the home hugged her gently. The smell of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. There was jazz playing softly in the background. Something classy, something Brent probably picked to impress guests. Eleanor noticed the little things. The gold-framed photos of Brent and Marissa at some beach. The tray of champagne flutes on the marble counter. The polished hardwood floors that looked like they'd never been stepped on by real children. The home was stunning, but it wasn't warm. She walked quietly, slowly, as if the walls could hear her thoughts. She made her way to the living room where a long table was set for 6. Marissa stood at the far end, setting napkins. When she saw her mother, her eyes widened, but not in joy. "Mom," she said, walking over quickly. "You're early." "I brought jam," Eleanor said softly, lifting the towel. Marissa looked behind her, panicked. Brent was standing near the table, sipping wine and talking to a coworker. She pulled her mother gently to the side. "Why didn't you wear something nicer?" she whispered. "You know how Brent is about first impressions." Eleanor gave a soft laugh. "It's lunch with my daughter. I didn't think I needed a costume." Marissa didn't respond. She looked tired. Tired of walking on eggshells. Tired of protecting Brent's ego. Tired of asking her mother to pretend. "Please," Marissa whispered. "Just try not to say too much today. He's been stressed." Eleanor nodded. "Of course, dear. I'll be quiet." Brent turned to them and frowned. "Is the water ready?" he asked. Eleanor stepped forward. "Actually, Brent, He cut her off, not even making eye contact. "Could you not just stand there? We're waiting." The room went quiet for a moment. Even the jazz music seemed to fade. Eleanor looked at her daughter. Marissa looked down. That moment? It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. No one screamed. No one threw anything. But that moment, that was when the story really began. Because Eleanor, the woman he thought was a nobody, just a helper, just someone who didn't belong, was about to change everything without raising her voice. And not because she wanted revenge. Not because she wanted to embarrass him. But because people like Brent needed to learn. Not with yelling. Not with rage. But with the kind of truth that makes you sit still. And rethink everything. Eleanor walked quietly toward the dining table, placing the jam on a side counter. She didn't speak. She didn't correct him. She didn't even flinch. Brent didn't notice the way the butler straightened up when she entered. He didn't see how the maid paused slightly and gave her a soft nod of respect. He didn't notice that the entire staff in the house had gone quiet the second she stepped in. Because Brent was too busy performing. Too busy trying to look like the man in charge. Too busy thinking Eleanor was beneath him. And Eleanor? She was too wise to correct someone who needed to embarrass himself. Instead, she waited. She waited because she knew something Brent didn't. This house, these floors, these walls, this chandelier above his head, none of it belonged to him. It was hers. And she had let him play house in it for far too long. But every story has a moment when the curtain gets pulled. And this one, it was just beginning. The room was quiet, almost too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. Eleanor stood by the dining table, her hands gently resting on the edge of a wooden chair. She could feel the weight of Brent's eyes on her back, but she didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She'd lived long enough to know when a man was busy looking down on someone. And Brent, he wasn't just looking down. He was stomping on whatever kindness he thought looked weak. He still didn't know. Not yet. He didn't know that the house he bragged about, the floors he walked on, the chandeliers he bragged about to guests, the kitchen he thought belonged to him, none of it was his. And Eleanor? She was in no rush to tell him. Because people like Brent always reveal themselves. The moment was coming. It was already here. Mr. James, the house butler, entered the room holding a white-gloved tray. On it were 6 polished glasses of water. He walked past Brent, past the guests, straight to Eleanor. He bowed slightly and said, "Madam Eleanor, would you like your usual seat?" Time stopped. Brent blinked. "Wait, what did you just say?" Mr. James didn't flinch. He simply repeated himself. "Your usual seat, madam. Shall I prepare your place at the head of the table?" Brent laughed awkwardly. "You must be confused. That's just my wife's mother." "She's not." Eleanor turned around slowly, calmly. Her expression hadn't changed. Still peaceful. Still kind. But something in her eyes had shifted. A quiet strength was rising. "James isn't confused," she said softly. "I usually sit at the head. This is my home." Brent looked around the room, waiting for someone to say it was a joke. But no one laughed. Not Marissa. Not the guests. Not even the maid standing by the archway, who quickly lowered her gaze out of quiet respect. Brent's face changed color. First confusion, then disbelief, then something like fear. "You own this place?" he asked, almost choking. Eleanor gave a small nod. "I bought it 8 years ago. After your wedding. It was a gift to Marissa, though I suppose I should have explained a few things." Brent stepped back. "You mean this house isn't mine? It's yours?" Eleanor's voice was still gentle. "I let you both live here. I wanted my daughter to be happy. I never asked for rent. Never wanted credit. But today, you looked at me and thought I was just some woman in the way. A maid. Someone to fetch your water." She took a breath. "You never even looked me in the eye." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of shame. Full of realization. Full of that awful twisting feeling Brent couldn't quite name. The one that comes when you realize you've made a terrible mistake in front of everyone. The guests looked away politely, pretending to sip water or fix their napkins. But the damage was already done. Brent had embarrassed himself, and everyone had seen it. Still, he tried to fix it. People like Brent always try. He forced a laugh. "Come on, that's not fair." "I just thought that I wasn't worth your time?" Eleanor asked. "No, I thought that I couldn't own something like this?" Brent's jaw clenched. He couldn't say yes, but he couldn't say no either. He looked at Marissa. She wasn't defending him. She wasn't even moving. She looked like she'd finally seen something she'd been avoiding for a long time. Eleanor walked slowly to the head of the table. Mr. James pulled out her chair with a respectful bow. She sat down, graceful and calm, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Because she had. Brent stood stiff, unsure if he should sit, speak, or leave. Eleanor folded her hands in her lap. "You know, Brent," she said, "I always believe people show who they are when they think no one's watching. You didn't know I owned this place, so you treated me the way you thought I deserved." Brent opened his mouth to speak. She raised a hand gently. "I don't want excuses. I'm not here to shame you. I just want you to understand that respect is not something you give based on clothes, or age, or who you think has power." Marissa finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "She's right, Brent." He turned to her quickly. "Wait, you knew about this?" Marissa nodded. She never bragged. She never made it a big deal. She just wanted to help us. She trusted that you'd treat her with respect, without needing to be told who she was. Brent's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Eleanor continued. "You were given a gift. A home. A chance to build something beautiful with my daughter. And you used it to build an image. One where you're the boss, the provider, the big man in the big house." She leaned back slightly. "But this house doesn't make you big, Brent." He looked like he'd been punched without being touched. "That's what real truth does. It hits you hard, even when spoken softly." Brent sat down slowly in the chair beside Marissa. His eyes were on the tablecloth now. He didn't speak. He didn't move. "And Eleanor?" She took a sip of water. The same water he asked her to bring. Only now it was being served to her. Because now he finally saw her. Brent sat in silence. His back hunched slightly. His fingers fidgeted with the napkin on his lap. He didn't look at anyone, not the guests, not the staff, not even Marissa. Especially not Eleanor. The house, so full of noise just 15 minutes earlier, had gone still. It wasn't quiet because no one had anything to say. It was quiet because no one knew how to fix what had just happened. Eleanor didn't raise her voice. She didn't storm out. She didn't even flinch when Brent humiliated her. But what she did do, she let the truth speak. And now Brent was sitting in it, drowning in it. He took a deep breath, trying to force himself to speak. Eleanor, look. I didn't know. I thought. She looked at him. Just looked. That was enough to make him pause. I thought you were just one of the new staff. I didn't mean anything by it. She tilted her head gently. Didn't mean anything by calling me old lady and asking me to serve you water? He swallowed. I was joking, kind of. I didn't recognize you. She nodded slowly. I see. Brent forced out a weak chuckle, trying to lighten the air. I mean, come on. You weren't exactly dressed like someone who owns a mansion. Eleanor didn't laugh. Neither did Marissa. The guests stayed still, pretending to check their phones or sip from glasses that were already empty. Brent continued nervously. You have to admit, if someone saw you walking like that, they'd think. That I was less than you? Eleanor finished calmly. His words froze. She didn't yell. She didn't shame. But her voice was clear, and every word hit like a quiet slap in a loud room. You didn't need to know who I was to show me basic respect, she said. You chose not to. Brent looked away. His jaw clenched, his face slowly reddening. I'm sorry, he mumbled. Eleanor shook her head. You're embarrassed, Brent. That's not the same thing. He looked at Marissa, hoping she would jump in. Save him. Shield him. Defend him. But she didn't. She was staring at the glass in front of her. Her fingers touched the stem but didn't lift it. Marissa had always known her husband had an ego. She'd seen it in the way he talked to waiters, the way he rolled his eyes at store clerks, the way he brushed off neighbors who didn't match their lifestyle. But this was her mother. And he'd called her old lady in her own house. Marissa looked at her husband and finally spoke. You do this too often, Brent. He turned to her quickly. What? You judge people, she said, her voice quiet but sharp. You think you're better. You make jokes, you call it sarcasm, but it's always someone else you're looking down on. Brent scoffed. That's not fair. It is fair, she replied. And then she said something she hadn't said in years. I'm tired of protecting you. Brent blinked. Protecting me? From what? From yourself, she said. From the way you make people feel small just so you can feel big. The table was silent. Even Mr. James, who had returned to refill glasses, quietly stepped back and waited behind the curtain. Eleanor didn't move. She just listened. Let it all unfold. Brent leaned forward now, desperate. I made a mistake, okay? I messed up. I didn't recognize her. I've apologized. But Marissa wasn't done. You didn't just make a mistake. You showed who you are when you think no one's watching. Brent stared at her. He'd never seen her like this before. And it terrified him. Eleanor stood up. Not quickly. Not angrily. Just gracefully. She placed her napkin on the table, smoothed the edges, and turned to her daughter. Sweetheart, she said. You don't need to argue. I've said everything I needed to say. Marissa nodded. Her eyes were glassy, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Brent stood too. Where are you going? Eleanor looked at him. I'm going to the garden. I need air. He stepped forward. Can I come with you? She paused, then said simply. This house is mine. But right now, peace in it is mine too. And I'd like to keep it that way. She walked out slowly, each step steady and light, like a woman with no anger, only truth. Brent stood there, feeling smaller than he ever had. He looked at Marissa again. You're really going to turn on me like this? Over one bad comment. Marissa shook her head. It's not just one comment. It's been years of them. You never see it because you think your words don't leave bruises. But they do. Brent's voice cracked. I didn't mean to hurt her. You didn't think she was worth not hurting, Marissa replied. That was it. That was the moment Brent knew he'd crossed something he couldn't uncross. Because some people forgive. Some people forget. But some people, they teach you. Quietly. Firmly. And without ever raising their voice. The garden behind the mansion wasn't loud with flowers. It was quiet calm. A stone path curved between trimmed hedges. There was a wooden bench under an old olive tree, Eleanor's favorite spot. She sat there, letting the wind move through the branches. Her hands rested in her lap. Her eyes stayed open, but she wasn't watching anything. She was thinking. She was remembering. This house had never been about showing off. It wasn't about power. It was supposed to be a gift. A safe place for her daughter to build a home. But now that peace was gone. and Eleanor had to decide what to do with the silence Brent left behind. Inside, Brent sat alone at the dining table. The guests had excused themselves quickly and awkwardly. One of them had mumbled something about urgent emails. Another one had suddenly remembered they had to feed their dog. Even Mr. James had left the room. Marissa stood near the entrance, arms folded across her stomach. She wasn't angry anymore. She looked tired, but not the kind of tired that needs a nap. The kind of tired that comes from holding everything in for too long. Brent finally spoke. "I didn't know she owned the house." Marissa said nothing. He leaned forward, desperate. "If I had known." "She didn't want you to know," she said. "Because she wanted you to be real with her. Not fake. Not polite just for show. Just respectful." He shook his head. "She could have said something. Warned me." "She didn't need to," Marissa said softly. "You weren't supposed to need a warning to treat her like a human being." Brent looked down at the table. "So what now? You hate me." Marissa sighed. "I don't hate you. But I don't recognize you either." He stood slowly. "You're not really going to leave over this, are you?" Marissa paused. Then she said the one thing he hadn't expected. "I already packed a bag." Later that evening, Eleanor returned to the house. She stepped in quietly, as she always did. She never needed to announce herself. Marissa was waiting near the hallway with a small suitcase by her side. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at her mother. And for the first time in a long time, she saw everything clearly, not just her mother's kindness, but her strength too. Eleanor smiled gently. "You don't have to leave because of me, sweetheart." Marissa shook her head. "I'm not leaving because of you. I'm leaving because of me." Eleanor nodded, proud. "Do you want to stay with me for a few days?" Marissa smiled through teary eyes. "I'd like that." That's when Brent came down the stairs. He saw the suitcase and walked faster. Wait, what are you doing?" Marissa didn't raise her voice. "I'm leaving." Brent's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Eleanor stepped forward, calm and firm. She handed Brent a small white envelope. He took it slowly, confused. "What's this?" "My decision," Eleanor said. He opened the envelope and pulled out a typed letter. He read it quickly, his lips moving silently. His face shifted. "This says I'm not allowed to live here anymore?" Eleanor nodded. "That's correct. But you gave this house to Marissa." "I gave it to her to live in," Eleanor replied. "Not to let someone walk all over her in it." Brent's voice cracked. "You can't just kick me out." "I can," she said quietly. "And I am." He stepped closer. "You're doing this to punish me." Eleanor looked him straight in the eyes. "No, I'm doing this to protect peace." Brent didn't know what to say. He had always believed he had control, that he had status, that he had power in this home. But now he had nothing, because the woman he looked down on, the one he thought was a nobody, turned out to be the one holding everything. And she had stayed silent for years. But now she had chosen to speak. Not with shouting, not with revenge, just with a boundary, a clear line. And once she drew it, she didn't erase it. A few days later, Marissa moved into her mother's smaller home across town. It wasn't fancy. The floors creaked. The kitchen window stuck. The couch had a rip in one cushion. But it was peaceful. Brent tried to call. He sent flowers. He even showed up once and waited outside in the rain. But Marissa didn't answer. She wasn't being cruel. She was learning what her mother had always known. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the most powerful answer you can give to someone who refuses to listen. One morning, Eleanor brought tea to the table. Marissa was already sitting there, reading a book. "Did you sleep okay?" Eleanor asked. Marissa nodded. "Better than I have in months." Eleanor poured the tea. "You gave me that house," Marissa said quietly. "But I never saw it the way you did." Eleanor smiled. "That's okay. Sometimes we only understand gifts when we lose what we thought mattered more." Marissa looked at her. "I'm sorry you were treated like that. By someone I brought into your life." Eleanor shook her head. "You didn't bring him into my life, dear. He invited himself. And now he's gone." They drank their tea in peace. No drama. No noise. Just peace. Exactly what Eleanor had fought for, not with lawyers or shouting, but with truth and stillness. Because at the end of the day, she didn't just give her daughter a mansion. She gave her a lesson. And that would last longer than any house ever could.